Hello, I'm Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. Egypt's parliament votes to allow its military to be sent across the border into Libya as fighting continues there. A grim milestone in South Africa as deaths from coronavirus pass the 5,000 mark. Also on the program, a return to the skies, but at what cost? As airlines across the continent prepare to resume flights, the industry says it needs $10 billion to keep flying. And we hear from the mother who has gone online to help other parents read to their children whilst in lockdown. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Egypt's parliament has voted to allow President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to intervene militarily in Libya. In a closed session, the parliament approved a mandate to do what is necessary to protect national security. The move inches Egypt closer to the possibility of direct armed conflict beyond its borders for the first time in decades. Egypt is backing the renegade General Khalifa Haftar, leader of the Libyan army, against the UN-recognized Libyan government. Well, let's talk to our correspondent in Cairo, Sally Nabil. She joins me now. Sally, does this mean that we will automatically be seeing Egyptian boots on the ground in Libya?
No. This does not necessarily mean that Egypt will be sending troops to Libya. The outcome of the vote today was highly expected, that it will give the mandate to President Sisi to send troops overseas to Libya. But according to a lot of experts we've been talking to, that Egypt is trying to use this as some sort of leverage, this potential scenario of getting involved in Libya as some sort of pressure on warring parties and on allies to come back to the negotiating table and try to find out a solution via diplomacy. According to experts as well, Egypt does not want to get caught up in some sort of a guerrilla war in Libya. Cairo has always accused the National Accord government and its ally Turkey of bringing in a lot of mercenaries and militants, and the Egyptian army does not want to get involved in such a kind of war, according to people we've been talking to. So yes, the parliament has agreed to sending troops to Libya, but this does not mean that we will see boots on the ground anytime soon. This might be only some sort of pressure or kind of political tactics.
And talking about that pressure that it wants to exert on other countries involved in this conflict, how is this move by the Egyptian parliament likely to be received by the likes of Turkey, who have 3,000 forces in Libya and what it calls advisory capacity, and is helping the UN-backed government?
Yes, the relationship between Egypt and Turkey has been quite tense since President Sisi came to power more than 5 years ago. Egypt, or the Egyptian regime, sees Turkey as some sort of a strong supporter and backer to Islamist groups across the country. It has even accused Turkey more than once of bringing in militant groups in Libya, and Cairo does not want to run the risk of having these Islamist militants operating along the border between Egypt and Libya. We are talking about more than 1,000 kilometers here. So this is why Egypt has been quite suspicious of all the Turkish involvement in Libya. But talking about boots on the ground at the time being is quite unlikely, because President Sisi and President Trump has just had a phone call a short while ago, and both of them reinforced the fact that priority should be given to dialogue, not to military escalation.
Okay, Sally Nabil there live from Cairo. Thank you very much. Well, let's have a look at on the ground, where the Libyan conflict has devastated the business community over the years and inflicted heavy losses on entrepreneurs and families. Many are trying to pick up the pieces and rebuild. The BBC's North Africa correspondent Rana Jawad reports.
Scenes like this are mirrored across the country. Libyans walking through what was once the beginning of an idea for a brighter future. A dream that was realized or a success story. Time and again, in recent years, people built businesses in what would later turn into a front line between warring groups. This is what is left after the guns go silent, a hint of what once stood there and the violence that took it away. Mahmoud Sharkasi's factory in an area southeast of Tripoli produced kitchen fittings and pre-finished doors.
The Ain Zara region is a developing area, and there is a lot of work behind the projects here, in Ain Zara in particular. We used to manufacture doors and kitchens as a great opportunity for investment and work, even if there was a recession. We used to think that soon there will be other buildings for us to work on, but now there is destruction everywhere.
The Libyan capital has witnessed two major battles since 2014, each between different armed groups vying to control the city and be in power. This latest year-long battle that recently ended was between forces loyal to the internationally recognized government and armed groups allied to the rogue general Khalifa Haftar, whose stronghold is in the east of the country. Thousands of families were displaced and homes and livelihoods were destroyed. But as Mahmoud points out, the destruction from every battle in this country, big or small, is beyond the buildings that housed these businesses.
We have the opportunity to work again, but we need time. The current state needs electricity, raw materials, or supply lines. I think that soon we will be able to bring it back to how it was, like we did the first time, God willing.
The battle for Tripoli has ended for now, but another one is brewing for control over the strategic city of Sirte, on the fringes of Libya's rich oil crescent, where the front lines were recently pushed back to. But for Libyan business people like Mahmoud, this is unlikely to be the last time the bullets and bombs fall, forcing them to pick themselves up and rebuild again. Rana Jawad, BBC News.
The death toll from the coronavirus pandemic in South Africa has passed 5,000, and with 328 confirmed cases, it is now the fifth most badly hit country behind the US, Brazil, India and Russia. Its cases make up roughly half of all the African continent, and its struggles are a sign of trouble to come for less resourced nations there. Well, Phumza Fihlani joins me now from Johannesburg. Phumza, what's been the reaction to these latest figures?
I think, Peter, what's happening now in South Africa for a lot of people is really driving that message home that the disease really is here and that it's taking a toll on people's lives. Authorities here had spent months trying to educate South Africans and even warning them of what is to come in the next few months, especially if behavior around trying to prevent the spread of the disease does not change. But we're now sitting with just over 5,000 deaths, and those are families that have been left with having to contend with losing loved ones unexpectedly. And for a lot of people here, that message now that we are really in the peak of the disease is starting to set in.
And Phumza, in the midst of all that is happening, there's some good news about this vaccine that is being trialed out there in South Africa. What more can you tell us?
That's right. The vaccine that we've just heard from, the results there from Oxford University, is also being given here in South Africa. The trial started last month, and what the jab is meant to do is try and boost one's immune system. So in South Africa, it has been given to two groups of people who are HIV negative and people who are HIV positive. And experts here are hoping to be able to use those results to see that it will be effective in trying to cure coronavirus. It is still very much in the early stages, of course, but health experts here are excited that it's coming, especially at a time where the country is heading towards its peak and expecting for the spread of the disease here to increase very quickly. And they're hoping that being able to find a vaccine or find some way of slowing down the spread of the disease will help to save lives here in the long run.
And the WHO also cautiously welcoming developments on that vaccine. Phumza Fihlani, thank you very much, speaking to us live there from Johannesburg. Now, the coronavirus has caused havoc to the global airline industry. In Africa, the continent's biggest and most profitable airline, Ethiopian Airlines, lost $1 billion in revenue between February and June this year. And just this month, South Africa Airways received a $1.2 billion rescue package. African airlines are in urgent need of about $10 billion to stay afloat. That's according to the International Air Transport Association. Kenya Airways is still awaiting a bailout after the government turned down an initial request for $65 million. The BBC's Hudhaifa Aden looks at the company's plans to return to the skies.
A little over a month ago, the International Air Transport Association said that African airlines are in urgent need of about $10 billion to keep themselves flying and revive the travel and tourism sector post-COVID-19. Africa's biggest and arguably the most profitable airline, Ethiopian Airlines, has lost $1 billion between February and end of June this year in revenue attributed to the COVID-19 lockdown. Kenya Airways, on the other hand, which has been in the red for 7 straight years, estimates a further $500 million in loss this year. Yet, international flights are likely to be allowed to resume this August in most African countries as restrictions to contain coronavirus loosens. But IATA safety guidelines, including maintaining social distancing in planes, are bound to be turbulent for passenger numbers and profits.
We as the aviation industry generally, we don't think that social distancing in aviation is practical or viable for that matter. And simply because, if you put in place mitigating controls to limit the transmission, we think it is not necessary to put social distancing.
If they can improve the social distancing, it is going to be okay. But if it is not, then it is going to scare a few people because you are just seated close with another person, which you are not observing 1.15. So if the plane can carry maybe a half of the passengers' capacity, that will be better.
African airlines are projected to record a combined loss of $2 billion in 2020 in what's expected to be the worst year in the history of aviation, according to the IATA. But most carriers are now looking for alternatives to stay in business.
What we have done is we have repurposed some of our wide bodies, some of our Dreamliners, to also do cargo. So we have around about 4 of them, which from time to time we use to do long-haul flights for cargo, mainly to China, Middle East, Europe. We do a lot of those. We also have done some to South Africa because of the volume of traffic. And what we normally take to Europe is mainly fresh fruits, fresh produce. This is vegetables, flowers, herbs. To China, we take seafood. And back from China, we bring PPEs.
As that first Kenya Airways plane gets back in the sky, most passengers would have their own safety at the back of their heads. But how planes strike a balance between passenger safety and their profits will inform the aviation sector and its future. Hudhaifa Aden, BBC.
Well, let's speak more on this now. Joining me from Nairobi's Raphael Kuchi. He's the International Air Transport Association's Special Envoy to Africa. Thanks for joining us, Raphael. Very trying times for airlines on the continent. What do they need the most? For the skies to reopen or bailouts from their governments?
Peter, I think the first thing the airlines need is bailout. They need financial support so that they can, when the borders are eventually open, they can be able to put their aircraft back in the air. As we speak, African airlines have literally exhausted all the finances that they had to support their operations because of lack of operations and because their equipment have been grounded all this while.
We've seen airlines like Air Mauritius filing for bankruptcy. Do you see more following suit if the governments don't step up?
Certainly, more airlines might not be able to get back onto the air if the government not come to their aid. As the situation is now, many of the airlines have run out of cash completely and are only hoping that governments will support them, as is the case in some of the other parts of the world. If government does not come to their aid, unfortunately, we are going to see fewer African airlines getting back on the sky once borders are open.
I read somewhere where you said that to kickstart African economies, countries need to support the airlines. But airlines are normally seen as quite elitist on the continent. They're quite expensive to use. Only the upper and middle class citizens can use them. How does reviving this particular industry help people in rural areas?
Well, if you look at what airlines really do for the African economies, you cannot, in today's modern world, no country can actually survive without an efficient air connectivity between its country and other countries and within its country and its neighbors. It is very important not only for the movement of goods and passengers and business people, but also for the creation of jobs. And if you look at the SDGs, about 7 of them are impacted directly by what air transport contributes. In Africa, 28 billion of the continent's GDP will be lost this year by IATA's calculation because of the impact of COVID-19.
Now, apart from COVID-19, you've mentioned the efficiency of airlines, but is it safe to say that airlines in Africa are not exactly viable businesses because they barely break even?
African airlines, many of them have been struggling in the last couple of years. They have not been profitable, but that does not take away the significant contributions they're making to the economies of their countries. And it is important to put into context that if these airlines were not there, how would African economies function, especially for intra-Africa connectivity and domestic connectivity? Their role is not just only to make profits or contribute to profitability, but also to ensure that the economic systems of the individual countries and the continent at large is actually properly integrated and functioning well.
Okay, Raphael Kuchi, thank you very much for your insight into this important story. Raphael is IATA's Africa envoy. Now, this is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, a declining daily catch, how overfishing is affecting livelihoods in Mozambique's coastal regions. Welcome back. I'm Peter Okwoche. Fishermen in Mozambique are seeing declining catches and reduced incomes. A recent World Bank report highlighted overfishing and destructive techniques as the leading causes of lower fish stocks. BBC Africa business reporter Vumani Nkize visited Maputo before COVID-19 restrictions were in place.
It's afternoon in Maputo Bay. The mood is high and money is about to change hands. The majority of fishermen here are young men, but Francisco Injalapane has been trawling these waters for 38 years. He recalls with nostalgia the former glory of the now deteriorating fishing industry in Mozambique.
10 years ago, I used to make $61 per day. That will be enough to cover my expenses. But now, what I manage to bring in doesn't help. It's just enough to survive. I only make $23 to $30.
According to the World Bank, Mozambique's fishing sector is underperforming, contributing just 2% to GDP, with a potential of over 300,000 tons of fish. The sector only brings in just a fraction of that amount. Even though industrial fishing companies have the technology to find fish underwater, they're still seeing declining profit margins.
For example, in the last 3 years, we captured tons and tons of squid, but last year we didn't capture anything. The squid has disappeared. I think it has been overfished.
Any lasting harm to the ecosystem will have a detrimental effect on fishing communities all along this country's vast coastline. Protecting fish species and these waters will not only secure food security, but economic prosperity as well. Maputo-based marine biologist Vanessa Cabanelash believes the solution lies in monitoring activities of big fishing companies at sea.
Government does have the permits and they do have information. So the Fisheries Ministry has information on the licensed boats. But they do not have the means to go and monitor them at sea. So they rely on the information they give back saying, okay, I fished within my quota. And you don't know, you have no way of checking if that is actually happening.
We visited the Department of Fisheries in Maputo to dig for solutions.
In order to catch fish, all the boats must be licensed. We install a tracking device and monitor them via satellite. Besides that, we deploy people who control the delivery of the product.
Evidently, authorities in Mozambique believe they have most, if not all, the solutions needed to leapfrog the fishing industry. However, it's the little catch by the fishermen that serves as a daily reminder of how much more could be done. Vumani Mkize, BBC News, Maputo.
Now let's meet someone who's found a gap in the market to help parents who've been busy homeschooling get a break at bedtime. Mary Kumson is a digital marketer and she's now thrown her efforts into Storytime with Mary, and it's proving a hit online.
Welcome back to Storytime with Mary. The whole aim of Storytime with Mary is to enhance children's imagination through the power of reading. Today's book is a really special book because it's called Elisi Goes to Ghana. I have an absolute passion for reading books to my young children, and I wanted to share some of that passion with other parents that may not have the time to read a bedtime story, or they may not even have access to books to read. Maya, what letter is this? Nobody expected 2020 to turn out like this. I'm a full-time working mum of a 2- and 4-year-old. However, in the past 3 months, I've been thrust into working from home. What colour is this one? And myself and my husband have had to become full-time educators of a 2- and 4-year-old. It's been hectic. However, we found that reading a bedtime story has been a calming end to the day. Elisi, with her newfound explorer status, sets off to Ghana. There's so much research out there that tells us that reading to young children, especially at this preschool age, helps to develop their social skills, their communication skills, and also helps them to start to recognise some words and letters on pages. And I've really felt the benefit with my own young children. Since starting Storytime with Mary, and we've been reading lots more in this house, I've noticed the benefit to my own children. Chloe has started picking up words in books, and I've even caught her reading stories to her dolls and her teddy bears and her little sister. I know I loved this book. There's been absolutely phenomenal feedback about Storytime with Mary. We've had people sending us videos from Ghana, from Cameroon, all the way in Mexico, telling us how much they love Storytime with Mary, and also videos of themselves watching Storytime with Mary with their preschool age children. It's been so lovely to see, and thank you to everybody that supported us.
Brilliant, isn't it? Now let's bring you a recap of the main global story today. Results from the early phase of trials of a coronavirus vaccine developed by Oxford University have shown it's safe and it's induced strong immune responses in volunteers. The vaccine is to be manufactured by AstraZeneca. That's it on Focus on Africa. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Goodbye.